Red Bull King of the Air was one of the original main contests. It helped kick off the sport as a whole.
It's one of the only events in the world that focuses on the big air thing.
It is called the King of the Air, air being the key word.
It was 98 when I had the very first event. Cost me $400 out of my pocket. Got a keg of beer. Mike helped me.
Like, okay, you spread the word, and I'll figure out how to get a couple buoys and judges down there, and we'll do it.
Mike was in the event. Corey was in the event, Don was in the event, Robbie was in the event, Lou Wyman, Elliot, Maurizio, Toscano, Chris Gilbert, go down the list. And we held the very first event with 25 kiters here on Maui.
Joe Cool said, why don't we do the competition and we'll call it the Kite Surfing World Championship as a joke. Because the year before, there was just like 6 people.
We called it the Kite Ski World Championships.
One of the people was Corey's wife.
We held it here at Kanaha. I had to negotiate with the canoe heli top guy because everyone sort of hated windsurfers, but people liked the thought of kites.
There was no prize money. It was really about going out and just having fun, and then the parties afterward.
There were more girls at this party than had ever been at any windsurfing party. And everyone said, kite surfing is here to stay.
Once word went out and the sport started to blow, that's when Red Bull approached us with doing an event. And then that's when we came up with the name King of the Air, and it stuck because at that time it was all about getting big air and the wow factor.
We knew it was going to be something amazing, but we didn't know when or how.
Right about when I got into kite surfing, there was this era of experimentation and development that was just going ballistic.
At that time, you could barely even call it a fringe sport.
It was a new sport, so anything was possible.
Actually went just up here in the cow pasture, learned to fly the thing, and got drugged through a bunch of cow manure, crashed the thing a bunch of times.
Everybody got thrashed.
We went out to this field and it was like just coated in cow manure. Well, nobody knew to put it over in the corner.
Launched it straight downwind like a kite.
Straight up like hot launching. It drug him from 0 to 60 in about 2 seconds.
It was crazy times, man. I mean, people were getting hurt, and we were doing a lot of experimentation ourselves. We were at home rigging things up and throwing it up in the air and trying to see what would happen. We were getting drug into things, and
Here we are launching from railroad tracks and off of small cliffs. If you could find a soccer field or an open grassy area, that's great. My dad would usually walk the control bar down to me, pass it off. I'd be getting my skis on near the water and then let the kites just yank me off the rock and into the water.
We were probably launching him in the worst possible way, which was you put the kite dead downwind to you, the guy just holds on, digs his heels in the sand, the thing rips up out of the sky and just sends you down the beach like 50 yards.
I had to take a surfboard and put foot straps on. I had to make my own bar out of old windsurfing boom.
You can't use stainless steel piano wire, but you should hear him sing. That piano wire's coming through the air.
We tied Manu to the car and then sent the kite up. The kite dove over to the right and just slammed him into the front of the car. And I remember we all looked at each other and said, that's not going to work. We'll have to test it another way.
We had like knives strapped to our shins in case the lines got wrapped around us. But there's no way to wind the lines up, so we'd like cut old coat hangers and make hooks.
We didn't have a harness, I didn't have straps, just a kite and a skimboard.
You had one kite, and that was it. So you had to make that thing work no matter what.
The future belongs to those that are brave enough to be first.
like you didn't know what was going to happen if you did this.
It made me, in a way, proud to be a kiter because at least you fought through that and you're willing to try something new, you know. Nobody really knew what they were doing, so every single person was an innovator.
You got to watch your best friends just get hucked around the beach because nobody knew anything.
None of us knew how to fly a kite. There was no training kites, none of this crap. We didn't know what worked. All we knew is that we were getting worked a lot.
When we were learning, there is no industry, there's no magazines, no videos, no one ever got paid to kite.
There was no tour, there was no school that you could go to learn how to do it. There was no one you could ask for help. I mean, it was all unwritten.
But for me, and for a lot of guys that were with me at the time, it was part of the attraction. It was this not knowing what was just around the corner.
And we would be teabagged. Like, you see a guy going by and he's got no board, and he's just being lifted out of the water like this all the way down.
If it was a red kite, it was either Elliot or Sierra Emery. If it was a white kite, it was either me or Manu. Also a red kite would have been Robbie. You know, like Rush Randall, he had the green kite. And so you could tell from miles away who that person was. You're a part of the family. You brought in your style, you brought in your personality or your girlfriend or whatever. You brought something into the sport that we all appreciate.
We didn't see a picture of anybody actually kiting on the water. We just kind of did it.
You have to get over some things within yourself to have that boldness, but you get very richly rewarded for it.
Corey came over.
Corey Rosler.
Corey Rosler.
Raisler.
Rosler.
It's Corey Raisler.
Corey was like, I think, the founder of the sport.
Well, I was kind of a reluctant at first and then a willing guinea pig for my dad. He was an armchair sailor that could calculate theoretically that you could sail 4 times the wind speed if you towed a hydrofoil with a kite. So I said, yeah, okay, so what does all that mean, Dad?
We're going a little bit faster than anybody's gone before. That's our bag.
And then the blowout races, it was clear from the beginning that kites were gonna be dominant. Sometimes, like the first blowout race, it's wall-to-wall windsurfers, and then they'd start the race and I'd sail through with my kite. Most of these racers, they don't know what's coming. The finishing clipboard would have all the names of the windsurfers crossing the line. They'd write my name down and then they crossed it out. But I still got a time on the clipboard.
Corey came to visit me and show me his kite ski and water ski system.
Don Montague, he wouldn't hide it. That guy was excited from the get-go. And he was right away trying to convince his boss, Robbie, that we gotta get into kites. It wasn't until 3 years later that he finally convinced his boss, we gotta get into kites. You know?
What'd you guys think of Corey and the kites? Oh, I think that's hot. Yeah.
The first time I ever saw him ride was actually in Silt, Germany. We were at the Windsurfing World Cup, and he was out kiting in the waves one day on his skis when we were hiding from the rain because it wasn't really windy enough for us to compete. And he was out there boosting, and it's like, wow, that's the guy on the water skis.
And I saw, oh, there's having the windsurf freestyle over at the hatchery. So I came by and did some big jumps for fun. I'd blown off the competition. And those were the jumps that people photographed. They remember that year you came through the hatchery and boosted that 30-foot jump, and it was probably only 20. The first time in Maui was, I want to say, 1993. We did a TV special. It was the morning weather. They were showing footage from the day before where I was surfing waves at Hukipa with 2 skis and a kite ski kite.
And he steps off the beach with water skis on, and he just jumps on, and we're like, oh my God, look at that guy. He's going faster than all the sailboards and more upwind, just screaming.
It looked fantastic. I couldn't wait. I chased him out in the water. Of course, I couldn't catch him. He would be jumping the waves towards shore, getting big air. The kite would be over the power lines.
He was able to go upwind. He was power and style.
He looked like a duck. I couldn't really figure out what was going on, but boy, it sure had me.
We're sitting there watching him going, that's pretty cool. We need to get one of those. So Laird got on the phone and hunted him down. We found him in Oregon. We're like, we need one of your kites.
I was trying to make a living manufacturing kites in the gorge, packaging them up with skis and bars, and one at a time by me and Randy and Therese, my wife. When she'd get off work, she'd come in and tie knots.
So he would literally launch the kite from the water to the end of the lines, the length that he wanted, and then he would water ski out of the water and then take off.
We were actually sailing fast. Stacks of flexifoils would yank us right off the beach, and if you had skis still on your feet, you were zooming. And that was when the buzz really hit.
So they went and had a little contest at Sprecklesville. Everybody showed up. Him and his guys stepped off the beach and just went upwind. And we'd do a run down through and just do what you could and then, like, you know, be done. Corey had this board. It looked like a wide water ski, and he kind of standed, like, obscured on it.
When you get on one board, like a wakeboard or a monoski, you can have one long edge that's much more efficient.
Well, he could dig his heels in and just go upwind, stay in the same place. So kind of all scratching our head going, wow. By the end of that day, everybody could go upwind. It was just monkey see, monkey do. We realized how weak we were in the legs. It's like, oh, you can go upwind. So that was a very defining moment. That day, it became a sport where you could get out of your car, go out, and come back to your car.
That whole time we were struggling with kite ski, we knew there was something missing. I didn't know until I landed on Maui in '96. What was missing was the camaraderie and the community aspect to it. We knew all along you were going to be able to go upwind. We just didn't know how you're going to be able to, like, support your family doing it. Right?
Corey was like the light. He was one of those guys that was paving the trail for what the sport became in the future.
Getting into kiting was one of the best things that I've done in my whole life. I go across the country and I go to a random beach and there's kiters there. And you just meet them and it's friendly, and once in a while they figure out who you are and they're sincerely grateful. That's the kind of recognition that matters.
The pictures and the video that came from Hawaii really drew everybody into wanting to do it.
Kiting was really visually contagious.
You look at a surfer compared to a windsurfer compared to a kiteboarder, your eyes are automatically going to go to the kiteboard.
There's a giant infrastructure of filmers and photographers
that has amazing potential commercially, for TV, for media.
When you're out in the water shooting, you're like attracting flies, and guys want to just get their picture taken.
One day I just saw this video of Lou and Elliot and Rush Randall jumping huge and flying for awesome distances. It just kind of inspired me to figure the sport out.
Yeah, I had the first kiteboarding pictures in Wakeboarding magazine, and the editor was like, hey, get some shots of these guys.
And then I saw a magazine article of a French guy, Manu Berton, kiting here at Lanes in Hokipa. And so when I came here, I was really thrilled to meet just one other kiteboarder.
It's that awe of hear someone jumping higher than a telephone pole and landing soft as a feather.
There was a pretty open spirit of sharing at the time, so the internet became real popular as a way to share a lot of the info.
You know, a guy goes and gets a 14-second jump. Everyone in the world knows about it next week. They'll be going online and seeing what some guy in Germany has to say about it. Guys know about it in Poland, in Russia, in Japan, everywhere.
People started using kiting for commercials.
You know, ESPN magazine, Outside magazine. They would get wind of it, and they would call me up and go, oh, we hear you have shots.
And we started having more and more competitions, and the prize money was going up, and we had a tour. And all of a sudden, we were kind of like, whoa, this is really going to become a sport. And so it was that kind of energy, almost right from the get-go, that just imbibed kiting.
The equipment wasn't up to standard.
There were some kites we would take them out and they would break right away. We couldn't even fly them, and some just worked better than others.
It seemed like every 3 months the equipment was changing.
There was so much room for improvement, but that's when it started just getting better and better and better.
This was the final revolution of a real kite bar. It's super light. Rush used this with his foil boards and ram air. If you crash the kite, you can reel the kite into you, get the water out of the ram air and relaunch it again and go.
I bought one of the first Corey Rossler Delta kites. It truly was an art to throw the kite up, grab the bar, and harness it before it all went bad. The lines were constantly breaking. They didn't have the Spectre lines they have today.
When you dropped your kite down on the water, there was probably a 1 or 2% chance you were going to get it back out.
But it was so wet that you had to sit there and dry it before it could actually fly back up into the air.
We all made our own control bars. We used old windsurfing equipment.
Brett came up with a reel boom to replace the big giant reel booms. He made one where we welded it all together and it just spooled right into the center into a little thing like this. And everybody at this table owned one.
And then once the kite started to evolve, you know, when we said, okay, there's got to be a better way. Let's change aspect ratio. Let's go to 4 lines.
Had a 5-meter whipping gun. That's the only thing that was there. And the 8-meter showed up, and that was like getting behind a tank.
If you looked at some of these videos of the first kiteboarding events, we're all on our Peahi boards.
It's cool when you make a new board and you go out and you're able to go 10 more miles an hour.
First real improvement was in the boards. You know, making boards that you could hold a rail and really stay upwind with against all that power of a 2-line kite.
My friend Elliot actually made the first chicken meat bar. We called it a chicken meat bar because it was kind of like, okay, you're a chicken, you know, you can't deal with the power, man, you know. It actually became the worldwide term for that bar.
The kite products have gotten just so amazing this year. You tow into the wave with all this power, and then you just shut the power off, and then it's all surfing. It's 100% surfing until you want the power back, and then you just sheet in, and then you got the power back. And so it's really gotten cool. And I think that's going to attract a lot more just the core surf.
We would call each other and meet at Ukipa to go kite together.
You certainly become friends with the second guy who shows up at the beach, because that's probably the guy who's going to launch your kite.
That's how it was, you know? It's like, okay, who's going to drive?
It's always nice to have someone grab your kite for you or grab your board if you crash.
The guy that you're cursing is the guy who's gonna save your ass when your kite goes down.
I've picked up more hitchhikers in the gorge, wrapping up their kites and walking down Highway 14. Oh yeah, I kind of got messed up and separated from my stuff.
And you'll run all the way down the beach to get that kite for that guy, because we've all seen what can happen.
I wave at everybody out there because I'm just having the time of my life.
I tell you what, you know what it is? You jump 30, 40 feet in the air, and you're feeling good, you know? And you want to tell a guy, did you see that?
All you got to do is look at all the smiles on these people's faces, and you can see the stoke is there.
2 years ago, if you told me I could be here competing in the final of the King of the Air with Flash Austin, I would have just said, yeah, I don't believe you, that's not possible. So it's just a dream.
The first time I saw kite surfing was '86 in France. And I was at a windsurfing World Cup. It was a day that there was almost no wind at all. In fact, for windsurfers, it was no wind. It was just crazy. There was a helicopter trying to create wind for these guys to windsurf. You know, they were on their biggest boards, their biggest sails, and they were not even moving. And some guy shows up on the beach with a kite and water skis. And he throws a kite up in the air, jumps in his water skis, and goes flying past all these guys. And he rounds this point, this rock point, and disappears downwind. And I was just scratching my head going, that was crazy. And I'd never seen him again for years. I found out later it was Bruno Legino, who was what most people consider the inventor of the modern kite surfer.
We felt that it was the beginning of the real sport.
We had heard that a Frenchman was working on a kite that had air in the leading edge, that if you dropped it in the water, it would actually float.
And he was developing these kites in a very simplistic way.
And he had no concept of how to actually make a sail or make a kite, so he actually made a reverse mold of what he thought the kite should look like.
Basically scaling the kites off of these molds.
And had to lay the pieces of the cloth on it to figure out how to cut the patterns so that it would not be wrinkled.
Because those were the tools he had, and they did an incredible job.
But I think he was just this totally rogue, recluse guy with this weird concept that no one even looked at him.
Then we tried to develop other markets for this kite, for example, safety or flying.
It took him about 12 years before he actually brought it to market and got the design to where everybody else could use it.
It was called Whip-A-Cat at this time, and it was
an inflatable, small inflatable kite, and it was a little knee board that you put on and you inflate it, and you just kind of putted it along the water. Bruno's design was the next biggest step. Being the shape that it is, it could roll over on its side and launch from the water. Now it started to make sense to everybody as opposed to sea anchor style kite, which is what the ram air kite is.
You could actually really crash your kite and get going again, where with a foil kite, you know, you could dip it here and there, but if you really crashed it, you were swimming home with spaghetti.
One of my team riders, Manu Bertin, came. He met Bruno in France, brought it to my loft, and I was just like, wow, this is it. This is a work of art, you know? So we took our expertise and developed software with Bruno to develop his style of kite, inflatable with all the controls. And I started playing around with cleats and systems on the bar to allow you to depower.
Inflatable kite made it viable.
That is when it made it a lot more acceptable.
It was really another defining moment of the sport.
Set the standard for the future.
At that stage, the sport became real.
I really want to bring this sport to everybody.
Robbie Nash, he's Robbie Nash. You know, what can you say?
You know, I used to be the youngest guy, and there was, oh, look, there's that little kid, Robbie Nash. And now it's like, look at that, there's that old guy, Robbie Nash. Some people say they don't know anyone that works harder than I do, no matter what they do. I look at it that I've never had a real job my whole life. Since I was a little kid, I've been doing this. I mean, it's evolved, it's changed, I've included other sports, but the core of my existence is riding waves, basically, and blasting around in the wind. Passion for something is a good thing. It's never been work, it's never been like, oh shoot, I gotta go do whatever today.
For me, I've been windsurf since I was 10 years old. When I used to get up and watch Robbie windsurf at 3 in the morning because it was on Sports South somewhere. And to be able to ride at Hokipa against him, he set the tone for me.
He's missed so many airplanes to sign some little kid's autograph.
He's on an airplane every other day. I see him not so often anymore.
I drag my feet getting into things usually. Once I got into it, I got really into it.
The first days on the kite, and the first 5 minutes, he's going out in the shore break in Kailua and he does a barrel roll. He didn't even know how to kite. If you get the opportunity to watch him in the contest, he will shock you how powerful and how high he will jump compared to everybody else's style.
He's just really fun to watch because he kites the way he windsurfs. He just keeps his speed up. It doesn't matter if he's coming in or going out.
He's got the temperament. He's the man. He's choking me up. I can't talk anymore.
Trying not to grow up. Trying not to be too responsible, trying not to plan too far into the future. All the things that people say are the wrong things to do in life if you want to be successful have been my key to success. I just love what I do, try to do it well. So far, so good.
Let's just say that the sport is in a cycle.
It's trying to find its footing. You know, it's trying to find its place in the surfing industry, who saw it in the beginning as a sport that people were flailing around through the air and spinning around out of control.
Flash Austin, Robbie Nash for the big air, high jumps. And then already at that point, you had the wake style just kind of being pushed by Lou Wayman, Elliot LeBeau, Mauricio. On the same island, they were going in two completely different directions.
For me, the sport is about flying and carving and surfing, and to other guys, it's handle passes and tech tricks.
It started out with big air, spinny jumps.
Foot out, you know, take your board off, spin it around.
Jump and take off your end from the bar.
Pokes, the big flicky airs.
Right now, the cycle that it's in is very technical, extremely difficult handle-pass combinations.
You know, they're really hard to do, but it's something that the public can't really relate to. They look at that and go, wow, that looks kind of... And then all of a sudden they see one guy just do a regular jump and he's 40 feet in the air, and they go, wow, look at that.
Just a normal high jump gets more applause from the beach than the hardest, lowest, coolest handle pass technical maneuver.
And what we try to equate it to is freestyle motocross. Motocross is very difficult racing. It's very technical and very difficult. You don't get 30,000 people filling a stadium. But when those guys started doing the super jump thing, it fills stadiums.
Competitions, it's made it hard to judge, because how do you judge somebody that's really going fast down the line, throwing lots of spray, as opposed to somebody that's just being very fluid, kind of down the face with a surfboard?
Kite surfing is about as close as it gets to surfing because you can go take any surfboard off the shelf and kite surf on it.
You know, you look in snowboarding, some guys run slalom gates and some guys ride a half pipe.
You come up and snap up off the lip, man. You're Superman.
You know, it's one thing to just go 40 feet and just hang from the kite and fly downwind and land. It's another thing to go 40 feet, do some spins and unhook and do some passes or do whatever you do.
That kind of all came together.
Suddenly everybody just stepped back and started to kick back and just say, hey, it's going to be all that.
I'm speechless. It's the first time I ever win anything. I'm so happy.
Where's Lou? Is he not here? Oh, you gotta get Lou.
I came out here to try and pursue windsurfing as a career.
You know, to me, Lou is one of the early, most progressive pioneers of the sport. And he actually did start the whole wakeboarding craze.
You know, everybody's, oh, handle pass is new school. Well, I got news for you. Lou was doing it a long time ago.
The rider that was most consistently pushing the envelope was Lou.
As far as influences and people in the sport, you have to look at Lou, hands down.
He invented so many of the tricks that are standards now. Just stuff that we're just going, oh my God, look what he's doing.
And he was doing them in 2000 on the most basic gear.
I can feel the good times coming again.
He was always doing the craziest stuff. Jumping rocks, 50-foot airs, high loops. It was unbelievable.
I didn't beat my head against a rock, you know. It just came, it was natural.
He used to saw surfboards in half and ride half of them with no fins to see how they work. And then he'd go shape it later. He'd go get the grinder and grind it into something weird and drink 2 Starbucks coffees and be up till 4 in the morning building weird stuff.
Lou was out on a McDonald's tray just ripping.
My friend Mauricio, he had a tray in his kitchen to wax it up.
I worked with him a lot in kite development, and he had tons of ideas coming out of his head. Just sometimes he was unable to get all those ideas immediately onto paper and make them reality. He had too many ideas.
I used to tell him all the time, Lou, man, you're way too far ahead.
I don't think even at the time people appreciated the stuff he was doing as much as the guys riding now.
He tried to bring it out to the media. We didn't see it.
If you're doing stuff that's so bizarre that they don't know how to judge you, there's no reason to compete. Just go out there and do your thing.
Lou Wayman is a perfectionist. He'll go out and do the same trick 10 times in a row and you won't even notice the subtlety.
Lou was never really part of the whole contest deal.
He would never get through a heat.
He'd show up, have his little kite and his little board, go out for his heat, do one trick, disappear downwind out of the contest area, and you'd never see him again.
But it didn't matter. Everyone knew who the king was.
Sure, I'd like to win, some money for doing tricks or something, but at the end of the day, it's well, did you really learn anything, or did you just kind of perform a circus act?
He's just on the edge of insanity with his riding, with his personal life.
It reminds me a lot of that guy in that Dogtown film, Jay Adams. Man, that's Lou, straight up.
He just couldn't hold it together. He's just
At least Lou hasn't been in jail, so that's a good thing.
There was Lou and Elliot, which was actually one person back then.
So I mean, Lou and Elliot for sure, they hung out together.
Lou Wyman and Elliot LeBeau. Literally, I thought that was one guy when I first started hearing about him because they were just partners in crime.
We got along a lot in the beginning. We were really into like the sport and how to get better. He's really like business oriented and very like, structured on this is what will fly. And I'm kind of off the edge, like nah, we gotta just go crazy.
Lou was convinced that you could wakeboard off of one. Pretty had his mindset. He's like, yeah, it'll work, don't worry, it'll work. And then, sure enough, it worked.
They were out every day. They had nothing to do except go out and kite.
Where I was king for a day.
Go have Starbucks in the morning or whatever and drop my truck off at the beach and take his all the way up 9 miles to the other beach. Once we got there, go to lunch, go back, get his car, come back, have another coffee. Whatever.
I saw it hands-on, riding with him every single day.
You could just go on and on about Lou. Not that he would say it. That man is a very shy man. Name another kiter that's on 7-meter lines. Name another kiter that's gone barefoot. Lou goes so high that when you're on the water watching him, you're afraid, and he's the one up there.
I'm interviewing Bertrand. He's this kid from France. I'm like, so what's up? He's like, Lou Wainman. I saw Hi, I saw Lou, I come to Maui. I mean, he could barely speak French, someone's translating, and he's like a Lou protege, and there's hundreds of Lou proteges out there. But, you know, it's like there's only one Lou.
La-di-da, la-di-da. Yeah, it's nice to have a friend.
Whether or not he got the recognition he deserves, you know, I'll straight up tell you he's the guy who helped make the sport what it is today.
It's really just a case of being at the right place at the right time. I mean, I think there's 1,000 people who deserve a lot more credit.
Feel the good times coming again.
A lot of the first kite mares, they happened out of public view, but they were real, you know. They were very real.
Puget Sound is like 35, 40 degrees. I'd get stuck out in the current, come back very cold, very hypothermic.
Literally, I was at a point where I did not have any energy left. I'd expended everything I had. It was a slow, like 10-minute drowning.
The wind died, and I was out there till 10 o'clock at night, floating down the coast. I couldn't get out of the current, and I finally hit Baldwin Reef. Nobody knew where I was, and then finally they realized I was gone, and then they sent out everybody looking for me.
They called them kite mares. Someone would have some crazy experience of being tangled up in their lines and being pulled out to sea, or seeing a big shark, just getting the crap kicked out of you.
In the bar, the wrong direction, being thrown through the trees.
I've had worse lickings kiting than just about anything. Water can be really hard when you hit it really hard.
Daniel got bit by a shark. Daniel's probably the only person I know who got bit by a shark. I give him my knee brace, and like a day later, I get the message, he's been bit by a shark, and the shark has bit the brace into pieces, but only like, you know, what, how many stitches?
30.
30 stitches.
So what Brett didn't tell you is he went fishing with it the day before, got a bunch of mahi and ahi guts all over it, and then said, hey, Dano, you can borrow it. He raced, no worries, enjoy.
90% of the injuries that happen on land, usually during the launch or landing process.
There was like one cement block in the middle of this field. We hit that cement block and then just ripped it up. If you could survive a whole coast run without having to swim in or have your friends have to stop their riding to help you drag all your broken equipment in, you know, you're a hero.
The wind increases, and all of a sudden you've got a paraglider on you, and you're heading towards a house or a tree or a rock.
We got pummeled a lot. I used to ride foils on my skimboard. And you make a mistake out on the outer reef in the big waves during the winter, you're not only swimming, but you're swimming with a fish net and a trash bag full of water with your skimboard.
You don't say I'm gonna quit ever, but you're like, what am I doing? It's funny, like, you don't panic, you know? I think that drive just to do the sport tomorrow and kind of pull it together, and you'll swim in 5 miles, man.
One of my worst experiences was falling out of the sky so hard and hitting the water so hard. You have so little air in your chest. You know, you got
the board's tombstoning, you're like, oh, here it comes, poof, past your head.
Shooting past your head. It was called stretching and loading a leash.
I lost my kite and my leash broke. And Mike's like, oh, I'll grab his kite. And so he kite surfed up to my kite and tried to hold it down on the water while he was flying his kite. And I'm swimming like hell trying to get up to him. And all of a sudden I get close to him and I look and he had let his kite go and my lines had wrapped around his neck and he was just trying to get the thing over his head. And he did just in time as the kite powered up and blew away. And I was just like, whoa, that was as close as it gets, you know.
One of the worst things I've seen was a friend who was learning at Kite Beach, and he knew what he was doing, but he was landing down by the sewer plant. His kite got away somehow and just drug him into a tree, and it knocked him out, and then the kite relaunched. And he got sucked up into the tree again, and it broke his hip. Finally, the kite fell in the road, and he's completely unconscious, and he's alone. And somebody was driving down the road, and they couldn't go by because there's a kite in the highway. For some reason, they followed the strings back and found my friend at the base of the tree. He recovered and uses 4-line kites now.
Can be dangerous. I think that's part of the draw of the sport, too. If it were riding a bike, a billion people would do it. They want to be safe, but they also want to have the thrill of what it feels like to be flying through the air or going Mach speed down a big wave.
Going out and really pushing yourself, somehow it qualifies your life, especially if you survive. You know, then you're like, yes, you know, I lived through it.
Flash was a character, is a character.
He was the character.
He was the best rider in the world, hands down.
Flash is definitely leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else.
Oh, I deny any involvement in the whole thing.
I think he's still here. I think he's on the North Shore of Maui. Rumor has it.
I came here in 1997.
Flash came from Florida.
I guess you could say that I was wave deprived as a child. You know, really sad, I know. I was skimboarding down the beach in Panama City Beach, and we saw a guy with a box kite where you get pulled on a buggy. And I begged him to let me try it. I felt the surge of power and the fun of the kite, and I was hooked immediately. I ran home, I grabbed as much money as I could, and I came back, and he ended up selling me the kite for like half the price.
He was a kite flyer, buggies and stunts, and he started going out on a skimboard in Florida. And he got paid to put an advertisement on his kite and do these 5-mile coast runs that ended at a bar. So he was basically like a cheap airplane advertising thing going by down the beach with this bar on it. And he goes, I gotta go to Hawaii and do what these guys are doing with the foot straps.
These things are like monsters. I'll tell you what, it has some raw power to it, man. I just take the kite and I whip it over there and boom, fly through the air. And then if you crash, it's not so bad because you're on water. I happened to meet a guy who was a street clown who ended up bringing me here to Maui. He's like, I'm going and I'm never leaving. And I said, oh, I'll go and I'll look for a couple weeks. I had no idea about what Maui or Hawaii was really about. I ended up meeting Joe Cool, strangely enough, within the first couple hours of being on Maui.
I just got, this guy just doesn't get it, you know, I mean, he doesn't really understand the wind yet. But he goes, one more time, he's just begging for me to stay, not to leave. So he launches the kite, he gets it up, jumps on his skimboard, goes sand sliding on his skimboard, hits the little short break lip, becomes airborne, drops back on his skimboard, just rips way out into the ocean. I was like, wow! I was like the first guy that could really kiteboard that I'd ever seen up close. I was just totally amazed, so moved into my house and...
I'd like to thank a few people, if I may. I'd like to thank my roommate, Joe Cool, because I'm probably about a month late on rent.
I started running around and introducing to people.
Well, Joe Cool kind of introduced me to everybody. I was actually working in a restaurant at Mama's Fish House, being a waiter and a busboy.
And he would kite at Ho'okipa, come into work at Mama's. Customers liked it.
I ended up coming down here to Ho'okipa and meeting a lot of the professionals.
Flash was an unknown. He had no training. He was just raw enthusiasm. And when you talk to him, you'll see.
Like I got the reins, and this is a bunch of horses. and they're rearing to go. They're rearing and ready to go. I tell you what.
2 to 3 minutes, Flash.
2 or 3 minutes till countdown.
Cool.
Till takeoff. T-minus 3 minutes to take off. Every time I would catch an air, like 8 to 10 or 15 windsurfers are like, woohoo, you know.
Flash would come out here on a super windy day and he would fly like 40 feet in the air and be spinning all over the place, and it's like, I'm gonna have to learn how to do that.
Because that guy was boosting whatever you gave him. It didn't matter. He'd switch in the middle of a competition. He didn't even care who was sponsoring him. He'd grab a different kite.
Everybody in Europe knew his name.
I couldn't wait to go kiting to catch air and surf waves. Then I became an airtime junkie.
He's arrives on Maui, buys himself an old surfboard and puts foot straps on it.
But we went down to Ukipa and he had this sandboard and he started at the top of the beach of Pavilions and rode this sandboard with his kite into the water and was gone. And we're just like, wow, what's that?
That guy could boost off the back of a wave and make it really impressive.
Wow, he took the thing to this whole new level.
Years later, I'm still here.
Oh my God. Oh, well, that's awesome. Then I'm happy now.
I'm against Hadlow, so I got to step it up a little bit. He's the current world champion, and I'm more than twice his age, so we got to throw down.
It was pretty cool. Had a few good runs, good jumps.
It's my first competition international, and I'm very surprised.
You don't realize it when you're in a sport and you're involved. You don't go tell your friend, hey, wow, you're really old, you know? Now there's more of an attraction to the younger crowd.
The youth of kitesurfing can be on a par very fast with much older, experienced guys.
This year, I've noticed a good 10 or 15 older guys that normally would have entered just going, I can't compete against a 15-year-old kid that woke up and just went, oh, this is natural for me.
I'm Nicola Porcella. I'm the youngest skateboarder in the world.
I'm 15 and I want to be better and better and coming in the top 3 of the world.
Getting those young guys pushing the limits, making it more technical helps to put it there, to really give it its own identity.
This year I started going big power moves and I'm gonna win the King of the Air for sure.
If you were 12, 13, 14 years old and windsurfing, you were doing it with like your dad and his friends. You didn't have other kids to do it with.
I have been kiting for about 3 years now. I'm 13 years old.
When they break down, it takes them 6 months to recover, but it takes the older guys about 1.5 years.
You have no fear. It's not until you start growing a little bit older, you start to grow a healthy fear.
It's just getting younger and younger and younger. I bet half these Red Bull qualifier kids don't even have their driver's license.
Back when we first started, we were like, man, it'd be cool if there's a bunch of kids involved, you know, and that's when we'll know the sport's probably gonna take off. You know, you look at the beach now, you're 25 years old, you're old.
Kids learn the quickest because they have no fear and they just listen and do what you say. The women, the second fastest. A gentle hand goes a long ways in the sport. And the men dead last. And if the man's got some guns, super last. All of that pulling on the kite is just counterproductive.
It's all ages. I mean, my brother 13, all the way up to 50 and over. I mean, all these guys, we're just hanging out and we're just having fun.
And it's great because you gotta have new blood coming in. It's what pushes the sport forward.
It's really cool right now because all the kids my age are actually on the top of the sport. And plus, I mean, you get to hang out with these guys and these guys are crazy. It's so much fun. The rider who's most impressed me is Ruben Lenton. Man, that guy goes off.
Started kiteboarding like 4 years ago in Holland. I can let go all my feelings and stress, whatever. It's so much freedom and you can do whatever you want.
You know, you start to get a little cocky and you're like, yeah, you know, I've worked really hard for where I'm at. And the next generation, the younger guy comes along and just takes it a step beyond it. You're like, I thought I was as far as I could go, but apparently I have a lot of work to do.
They're picking up this sport so fast, which usually for a lot of ocean sports, it takes a long time to get to that level.
They're doing it, and they're ripping. Very quickly, we'll be steering the future of the sport.
Kiting is a global sport. It blew up in a couple of years just all over the world.
There's so many guys coming into it from so many backgrounds, from so many countries.
I'm originally from Colorado Springs.
Right now I live in Los Angeles.
Japan.
Holland.
South Africa.
France. Germany.
I'm from Holland.
Houston, Texas.
Hood River, Oregon.
A local Maui boy.
Fly to it's something that's been very good for the industry and the sport.
It's a qualifier event in 10 to 15 countries. When you win the competition there, you get the flight and also the accommodation paid.
It's expensive to fly, it's expensive to stay here in Maui, especially if you've never been here and you don't have friends to crash on their couch or anything.
That makes it much easier for the riders to come.
We've grown up with this sport, and it's been this novel thing that we're all traveling around the world doing.
And I mean, I went from only being in Seattle and maybe going to a few spots around the country for sailboat racing. Next thing I know, I'm like in Spain, I'm in Germany, I'm in Amsterdam, I'm in Dubai.
I just came back from Italy. I got all my kiter friends together. I was there for a week, and they had me on the news every night. They're just looking for something new. In Europe, people really want to participate.
It'll open up the world. You'll be able to go in spots you would never be able to go before.
All of a sudden, it's opened up all these waterways that nobody went to before.
All these places in South America and over in Europe.
It's really growing fast because people are going, there's a lot more places than we were windsurfing.
So that travel destination side of the sport is really opening up the whole world.
The fact that you could ride a McDonald's tray as compared to a windsurfer shows you the potential of this sport.
The kite companies, they're still innovating. You're seeing lots of gear changing.
I think it'll be kind of like what skateboarding became. A skateboard can be used in a swimming pool, or it can be used to go from one town to the next.
Back in '95, we're going to a ski hut in Austria. I pull out my kite, put a rope on my back, and pulled 4 people at a time up to the ski hut for New Year's Eve. You can go 50 kilometers in one direction with a kite to the next ski hut, have a glass of wine, and kite back to your car. Have you seen the footage of snow kiting? There's some guys just basically soaring with the kites and kite looping over snow. In Norway, they have 30,000 active snow kiters. If you ever get the chance to try to go somewhere, you'll see why they're so excited.
I think extended flight is what's coming up. The kites will be somewhat collapsible for size and changeable for size, and we'll be in the air much longer.
We won't even have kites. I think we'll have that arc shape, but we won't have lines and we won't have boards. We'll go inside that bladder, so we'll have just like a wing. You'll basically be like a pelican, be able to do flips and stuff. The original idea of kiteboarding was to have everything in your backpack and almost be able to travel incognito. Eliminating the lines, eliminating the bar. I don't want to say a Batman suit, but yeah, it's pretty feasible. There's no reason why you couldn't get inside of it, mold it into a wing, and a very lightweight one to collapse down to something that goes in your backpack.
I think kiteboarding is growing really fast because it's a very beautiful sport. It's intriguing. People look at it and go, how on earth do you do that?
Maybe 10 years from now, I personally think it'll be a kite that will break the world speed record on water and on land.
When windsurfers hold the world speed sailing record, and we've got twice the sail and half the board, you think you got potential.
We haven't even seen it yet. This is just the beginning. We don't even know what's around the corner, like we didn't see kiting coming. I think it's got a big future.
I wake up really early, go to school, look at the beach all day, look at the water, it's way down there, I gotta get there.
You're always looking at the trees to see if there's wind.
It's just such an elated feeling of anti-gravity. You know, we all love to fly. We all love Peter Pan. You don't weigh anything. When I kite, I'm flying.
It's kind of like a magic carpet ride, you know? You just get pulled around all day for free.
It's not slowing down. The sport is just taking off.
They were right in the industry. I mean, it is a very futuristic sport.
The fact that you can go upwind and that the sport finally got traction and established itself
just opened up whole new possibilities.
You're tapping into this energy that you cannot see.
We're able to create power. It's like a propeller.
You can just move this kite all over the sky and
You have all these other sports coming in. Now it shows more potential.
We've taken everything we could from those sports, and now we're going our own direction.
It's really, really fun to be able to go out there and just use you and the wind and the water and just express yourself however you want to.
Because of everybody who's taken it to this level, past and present, kiting's going to be something amazing.
Hello. Hey, Brutus, where you at?
5, 4, 3.
I am Mike Waltz with an E.
Allow myself to introduce myself.
I don't know.
It starts to go up, and we hear, help! That's not how
So he lets go, and I swear I'm like a telephone pole height, dangling, just going,
There were girls coming to see, you know? And that just never happened. You remember that? Dave.
If this is the last year for the King of the Air, then we went out with a bang with 12-foot firing surf. And then I'll pause right there, but then I'll give you this one, input option. Option 2. I heard a lot of talk about the King of the Air not happening next year.
Are you married?
No.
Not married?
I have a girlfriend.
That's what you You bring her flowers when you get off the plane?
Fuck yeah.
This is my tailgate, which requires this broom handle in order to hold it up. It's a nice feature. I have a taped up window over here on the side. I don't know if you can see that. So as you can see, kiteboarding has been very, very good to me.
I remember letting go of one of my kites, and it flew up and over and landed in the sewage plant in like this bubbling soup of raw sewage. It was the only kite I had, so I had to like get these Safeway bags and rubber band them to my feet so I could walk out, and I had to walk through a bunch of sewage to pick my kite out of there. And I remember everyone was like sitting laughing at me while I was in the middle of this shit pool.
My friend bought a bunch of chickens, or chicks, and we raised those and ate the eggs, and There were a bunch of squirrels around, and we killed those one time, you know, because they were trying to eat the chickens, and we're like, hey, let's try eating some squirrel.
And I go, what happened to you guys? And they're like, oh, wow, barbed wire fences, man. I go, what do you mean barbed wire fences? What the heck? What's up? And I said, wow, that looked really cool, man. I said, wow, cool, this is neat. Wow, something cool for the sport. Next you know, wow, that's just incredible. Where the heck is this thing gonna go? So I went, oh my God. No, you must have the whole thing. Every few hours a fire marshal come in and scatter everybody out of there and get everybody out of here. And we're going, God, and oh my God, look at these people. This is amazing. You know, we're just going, oh my God. Oh, I mean, it was real exciting. Anyhow,
that's all the time we have right now for the Maui Weather Today show, but I look forward to being back with you again tomorrow morning for another look at Maui's weather today. Until then, have a great day out there, and aloha.